Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno, welcome back to another episode of my game engine series. So we've been on this journey of getting the mouse to be able to click on objects in our scene and actually select things. The previous episode was to do with actually doing some, which I'll link up there, with doing some kind of readbacks from the frame buffer so that we can actually see what entity IDs were under the mouse cursor, and now we're going to be extending that so that we can actually click to finally pick an object, because this is where everything has been leading to, and we are basically 90% of the way there. We just need to make it so that the left mouse button actually selects the object, and we have to go over object selection as well, because I don't think we have an API for that. So jumping into the code, this one should be a fairly quick episode, hopefully. We have this pink cube, and it's already crashed, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but it's because of this tab bar. And see, I can't even get it not to crash. But it's okay, we have a fix for this. Okay, so we have an issue clearly where if we actually look at the call stack, for whatever reason, hovered entity, well, no, we know why this happens. So hovered entity gets set to whatever the pixel data is. If the pixel is out of bounds, so if we're trying to access an area of the frame buffer that is out of bounds, because of like the X and Y coordinate, something being weird, then what that will actually do is return some garbage data for us. That's an issue because garbage data is not -1, therefore a blank entity does not get selected. Instead, an invalid entity gets selected. And on an invalid entity, when we try and actually retrieve a component, of course, entity, that library is like, hey man, I don't know what the entity this is, I'll assert. And that's what you're seeing over there. So luckily, this has been fixed by someone from the community. Shout out to Louis Filipposi, who has contributed this little pull request, which I think Lovely Santa has merged in. I just haven't pulled it yet. So basically, you can see in the diff here, and you can, of course, go to the repository. Don't forget we're in the mouse picking branch for now. And read through this change if you care that much. But basically, this is just a better way to actually calculate that viewport min and max region, so that when we actually do set the rectangle for like I am Gizmo and also the viewport bounds, they're actually set correctly to what they should be and not some weird values. So that's an important fix, which I'm going to accept, assuming I have no changes, which I don't. So let me just check out that commit, and I'm also going to make sure that I fetch just to make sure I'm on the latest code, which I now am. So if we rerun that, hopefully what you'll see here is that it doesn't crash, and we can hide the tab bar if we want. But also, what I was going to demonstrate is without the fix, things were basically a little bit misaligned. So we have this thing up here, hovered entity, which shows the current entity that I'm hovering over with my mouse. So at the moment, and this, by the way, if you're new, this is not a cube. It's actually 3 quads with different shades of pink. So when I hover over them, it actually says what is currently being hovered. So you can see it's pretty much it. Well, it is pixel perfect for top, right, and left. But what used to happen is if you drop down this tab bar, it was misaligned, right? And you can see that's now gone. So if I drop down the tab bar, obviously the size of the viewport has changed and it's off by this many pixels, but you can see that with this new contribution, it's totally fine. So thank you again to Louis, yeah, we kind of have this fix, which is very much appreciated. So how do we go from knowing, what entity we're hovering over, which is fine, how do we go from that to actually being able to click to select something? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm assuming that I'm pretty sure I actually, I don't know, it's been 2 weeks since I recorded the last episode, but it's been a week for you guys, I guess, so it's hasn't been quite so bad. But last episode I did task you guys with some homework, I think, to work out how to do this. Now I want to make this series a little bit more interactive going forward. So what I might do is actually set up some kind of pull request system or whatever for you guys to actually submit these homework assignments, and it might be a good way for you, if you're learning, to actually have some actual kind of tasks and exercises that you can do, and then I might go over some of them, see what the solutions are, and maybe even just integrate some of that code, or at least talk about it as I implement it myself, so that I can also explain it at the same time. So I might do stuff like that in the future. Drop a comment below if you're interested in something like that. But again, this is quite trivial. All we really have to do is first of all, design some kind of API that lets us select an entity programmatically. I don't think we have that at the moment. What I mean by that is the only way to currently select entities is to click on them in the scene hierarchy. And then of course we get the relevant the relevant properties pop up, as well as if we have gizmos currently enabled, you can actually see the gizmo pop up. So that's the only way to select objects at the moment. We can't programmatically be like, hey, select this entity. So we need something like that. That's step one. Step two is to simply, well, the simplest case would be when the left mouse button is clicked, if we're within the viewport, look at what the hovered entity is and just set that entity to be the selected entity. It's pretty simple, right? There are a few things that we have to avoid, mostly with like, you know, the gizmos. For example, if we're hovering over a gizmo or using a gizmo, the left mouse button is in fact pressed, but we don't want to suddenly select this top panel, for example, because you can see hovered entity says top, right? But we're obviously in the middle of an operation and we don't want to deal with that. So you need to kind of be aware, I guess, of stuff like that. So let's close it and let's make this happen. So scene hierarchy panel is the thing that is currently kind of controlling our selection, because you can see we have a selection context here, right? We have a get selected entity, but we don't have a set selected entity. So let's quickly write that in. So set selected entity, 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 and that has to do a few things. So first of all, we obviously need to update our selection context to whatever the entity is. But I just want to make sure that, is that actually it? I think that might be it. Let's try with that. I don't know. Hazel Dev has a few more things, but then again, this is not Hazel Dev. So there is, yeah, hover entity. Okay, so technically speaking, what we should be able to do now, right, is basically go to the events, right, that we have here. So events, and then in event, we have this on key press. Let's do an on mouse button pressed, which will of course be useful for a lot of things inside the editor. So mouse button pressed event, on mouse button pressed. And then what we're going to do here is basically check to see if the button is mouse. Is it mouse code? Mouse button? Mouse? I guess it's this one. I don't know. I didn't write this code. Someone refactored it. Mouse. I don't know if mouse is the best thing. Maybe it should be mouse button because these are all clearly buttons, but we'll talk about that later. So if get mouse button is button left, then again, all we really need to do is set the selected entity to be whatever the hover one is, even if it's null, right? Now this is a problem because again, this means that when we're not really clicking, this could be a click anywhere on the entire layer. And remember, the layer contains the whole I'm GUI panel situation. So we need to only make sure that we do that if we're over the viewport. Now I believe we have something called viewport hovered. So if we're hovering over the viewport and we click, you might want to mandate it being focused or not. I'm not sure about that. Because that way you'd have to click twice potentially, but that might be good because if you're trying to just click back on the viewport to activate it and you don't want to deselect something, different tools do this differently. I probably won't get into that right now. Basically, we'll just say if the viewport is hovered, let's go ahead and do that. Right, let's give that a go. And yes, this was a mistake. Thank you, Stream Chat, for pointing that out. I don't know how that happened. Oh, because key press, I think, was already a thing. That would explain the compile error. Stream's got my back. Or not. Yeah, I think we just have to return. I always forget. I always forget this is a... no, maybe not. I did make it a boolean. So what's wrong with this? Should be good now? No? Okay, can't compile any code today. That apparently is illegal. Yeah. Mouse button pressed event. Forgetting all of our types. And hopefully now we should be good to go. Should really get it to load pink cube in automatically. But now if I click, you should be seeing here that it's actually selecting it, right? Including nothing. So if I do this with gizmos, it's much more satisfying, right? You can see that now if I click on something, it actually selects that object, which is pretty cool. So I can move this around, move this around, move that around. Oops. Oh, okay, so this is exactly what I was talking about. Not only does it, will it select objects that we don't want, like that. Well, it won't, because I guess it's not a pressed event. But the problem is that you can see when I click on this, it picks this other object because it's in front. Even though the gizmo is in front, like this will work. But if the gizmo is in front, it's going to select the other objects. Or what we saw earlier, I can't move it. What we saw earlier was, I think it was kind of like that. And so when we click over here, obviously, in terms of the frame buffer, the mouse pointer is actually over nothing. So when I click, it deselects it. So there's a few little issues here that we need to iron out. This stuff is very minor, of course. And I'm sure all of you guys are capable of fixing it yourselves, which you can definitely have a go at doing. But basically, what am I going to do? So I am Gizmo. So there is a little I am Gizmo is using situation, right? So we kind of check this every frame. This is clearly a global thing, and it just returns if the context is being used. So we could actually just copy this exact code. We don't have to like store our own boolean or anything like that if we don't want to, unless we want the state to persist, which I'm not sure about that. I just literally don't know. But let's try and do something like if it's not using, but also I believe if it's not hovered, because using is fine. That's if we're in the middle of a use. I don't actually think we need that one, to be honest. I don't think hovered is the same as using. So there's just a few little caveats here, I guess, that we need to iron out. So that's fine. And then you can see it still does the selection, because what we're actually after is hovered. And I believe that using bounds, using bounds is the wrong thing. Is over is probably what we want. So make sure that we're not actually hovering over that I am Gizmo thing. All right. So now if I'm behind this and I click, you can see we don't lose focus. And same with being like that. If I click, you can see we're still good to go. Now, one thing that does happen is if I hit Alt, which obviously activates the camera, and then I click, I lose my selection. So yet another little case. We could be like camera in use or something like that, but for now I'm just gonna do input is key pressed, key code or key left Alt. So if that's not pressed. So this is becoming pretty long. The way that I would probably fix this or make it a little bit better is by just essentially writing a function that dictates whether or not we're actually in the viewport or if something's supposed to be blocking an event directly into the viewport. So that's probably what I would do, because for example, you could write a function that returns a boolean called can_pick or can_mouse_pick, and it would just return this, and that's a little bit easier to manage than this huge like if statement, because obviously like, you know, we know that this is mouse picking, but this code doesn't actually have anything to do with mouse, like it doesn't say the word mouse pick anywhere. So it makes sense to us at the moment, but as code grows, it's very nice to be able to, if needed, you know, bring it out into a function or at least add a comment or something like that. But then if you can simplify, you know, expressions like this to make them Boolean statements that return things, you know, like functions, I mean, then I usually tend to do that, just because, again, when you read through the code, you know, don't worry about performance and everything like that. I'm sure it'll be fine, probably be inlined anyway. But even if it did have a little tiny performance penalty, I'd probably still do it, because it's just nice to be able to read code that looks good, and that will probably be better than being like, oh yeah, the reason my engine is slow is because I write little Boolean statements that are actually functions, and then that causes a jump in my code. Okay. So, yeah, so now I can hit Alt and obviously do anything I want with the left mouse button, and it doesn't select things. So the next step is kind of just to use this a little bit. Control, obviously, is something I can do to snap stuff as well. You know, we didn't test the other gizmos, but I'm sure that they're going to be fine. I can pick this and move this around, and you can see that it's all in screen space, by the way, so that might be a problem, because if we go really small, you can see this gizmo is basically unusable. don't realistically think anyone will be using the editor in that small of a resolution. But with something like this, you can see it works perfectly fine. And the intended use is kind of at least probably at a 1080p resolution, because I don't think that you should probably ever have this window not maximized. So that's another thing we could probably do, is start up maximized. But anyway, this was a pretty short episode, which is nice. I like having short and sweet episodes. But we're now at the point where obviously we can actually, well, reasonably well, we don't have a grid or anything. This is very quickly evolving into a 3D engine, actually. I could imagine having a grid there, loading 3D models, positioning stuff around. That would probably be very fun, but I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to go there just yet, because I did promise like a 2D workflow, and I think we probably should do that. So I'm not even sure what we'll touch on next. I'll have a good think and probably discussion with the stream. Don't forget that I do stream on twitch.tv/the Cherno pretty often. Well, this is the 3rd time this week, actually. So, yeah, so we will see. But thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button below. And also, you can go to patreon.com/thechannel to help support this engine and everything I'm doing here on YouTube and all the tutorial videos that I make. You'll also get access to Hazel Dev that contains a lot of stuff. I need to make a video about Hazel Dev that I can just refer people to I think. But actually, you can watch the latest devlog if you want to see the kind of stuff that's inside Hazel Dev that you could get your paws on if you if you help support on Patreon. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.